my winter knitting plans have only just begun and I'm already off the rails because... Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm a graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. So today I've got a whip update for you on a couple of different projects because one of them was not entirely going to plan and I need some time to definitely think about it, maybe solicit some feedback, so stay tuned. And then I do have some real reading updates for you today in our Off the Needle segment at the end. As for my mug and tea today, this is my Studio 648 mug that I got at the end of last year at the One of a Kind show. And in it today, I am just drinking my cheap almond tea from the grocery store because it's a Friday night and I'm tired and I don't have it in me to do loose sleeve tea right now. I'm also wearing pajama pants because I don't need to get up to show you any long finished objects today, so I will be seated. We're cash today. This is a low-key episode of the podcast because that's what I can bring you today, but at least I can bring it to you in the evenings now that I have like a proper filming light, so I'm not beholden to daytime hours, which is helpful. Seeing as the sun goes away at like 4:30 right now. That's not entirely true. I think it's more like 5 something now, but it was 4:30. So it's nice to have that flexibility. It's not super nice at this exact moment where I'm like kind of tired, not my favorite time to film a podcast. However, this is when I have time to film this podcast this week. So here we are. Hi, hello, you're welcome.
Hello, Editing Alley here. I would like to fight Apple because this is only my second time recording one of these videos on my new phone that I got for, the better camera. Allegedly, only it turns out it has all these fun settings where it does wild things on its own without your permission or telling you it's doing them. So this whole video apparently recorded on my wide angle lens, which it doesn't look wide angle to me, but it does look like hot garbage as quality goes. And that tracks because that lens is not as good. So sorry about that. It's also hilarious because I'm talking here about like my new lighting so I can record at night. In theory, yes, you wouldn't think that from this video, but sorry about that, and now to fight with some settings and try to figure out how to not let that ever happen again. Sorry.
As for what I'm wearing today, this is my quilted sweater coat by Alexander Tavel. I did contrast cuffs on this one and some fun Intarsia colorwork pockets that aren't in the pattern, but I was apparently feeling really ambitious when I was doing my first ever knitted garment, because that's what this is. It was my third knitting project, but my first garment. So this one I've had for over 2 years now, and it's in need of a little bit of repair, actually. See if I could show you. My cuff, so something happened where I'm not sure if the yarn like got snagged on something and broke, or if I just like in a very early project like didn't weave something in properly and something broke. I don't know, but suddenly like my edge, it was a little bit more intact than it is now, but a piece had kind of broken. Like think of it more like this if like one of these little legs was broken. And I was like, ugh, okay, I need to fix that. Did I fix it? No. I continued to wear it. It's now kind of descended a little bit further. There's actually like a live stitch hanging out now. And, part of me putting it off was that I was like, I don't actually know the best way to fix something like this. Like that it's just snapped in the spot where like there's not really like a length of yarn for me to work with to like repair. I don't know. And I didn't want to do like some darning that would be like super obvious, but like now that it's at this point, I feel like actually my bet is to find whatever yarn I've left over from this, because it's not like I was playing yarn chicken. So obviously there's some, and then just unravel the cuff, because this is actually one where I believe that these are knit from the cuff up, but you can see if you look closely at the base of these, on this one, you can see where the color switch happens. There's this row where it's sort of like the yellow intermingled with the brown in a way that you can't on this one, because this was knit the way the pattern is written. And this one, I did the cuff at the end because I had originally knit it in the orange that's in the pockets and found that I didn't like it as the sleeve. So I unpicked that and then picked up around the edge to knit this out. So that does mean that I should be able to easily unravel this a little bit and reknit the end of it. And in doing so, will allow me to fix an error that has been like low-key bugging me the whole time. So shortly after I finished it, I realized these cuffs are actually like slightly different lengths. Like this one is a row short. And I mean, this is a chunky enough knit that a row is a not insignificant amount of length. Because this was so early in my knitting, I made an error in how I was counting the rows. Like, when you get to like the last stitch and you have like the V of the stitch, but also like the loop over the needles. And I wasn't sure, like, is that another row or is that just part of this row? Like I didn't entirely understand how to count my rows, which meant that I ended up one off. And so this gives me the opportunity to correct that, make these actually the same length. But I'm also debating if I'm gonna do that, should I actually remove both cuffs, which will be harder on this one because this one was knit from that, so I will have to do the whole unpicking thing that I did here, and then you know what I'm talking about. But like I did it on this one, so obviously that means I can do it on this one. And the reason that I might do that is just that these cuffs are wide. Like you can see they hang pretty openly over my hands. And because the sleeves on this one are long, it would be really nice to have tighter cuffs that cinch better so that I can like push up the sleeves. Like currently, if any of my sleeves are the way, I have to actually like roll them to get them to stay, which is fine. But like if I'm gonna go in and do a repair anyway, like at this point, it's not like it would take me particularly long to redo one of these cuffs, especially if I'm doing a big round of decreases, so there's less stitches anyway. So that's the thing I would like to do. When will I get around to doing it? This is the question. Maybe we'll just let this get worse for a while until it becomes impossible to ignore. TBD. Anyway, if you've been here before, you know that when I wear old knits on the channel, I like to revisit them and see how they're doing in terms of both kind of finding a place for themselves in my wardrobe, in my regular use, and what that means for their cost per wear. So this project cost me $157.55 Canadian in pattern and materials, which converts out to about $110 US, and I have worn this 101 times since I finished it about 2 years ago. I feel like that's pretty good. It definitely has gotten some very solid rotation, which puts us at a current cost per wear of $1.55 Canadian, or about 108 cents US. So the quilted sweater coat is a pattern by Alexander Tavel, and it's designed to accommodate up to between a 57 to a 63 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. Now, before we get into the whip updates, I do want to mention this is the last video of my first year of my YouTube channel. So the anniversary of my first knitting podcast episode is just a few days after this video is going to go up. So first of all, thank you so much for watching, because like when I started this channel, I was like, there's a good like 70% chance that like no one really ever watches any of these, and this fizzles out because I don't want to just be like speaking into a void. So the fact that it has very much not felt like speaking into a void, that anyone has subscribed to this channel in the last year, is so cool to me, and I appreciate so much that you're here and watching. And I also know that like when I was just watching knitting podcasts, I was very curious about the like behind the scenes of these things. And I mentioned before, it was actually Knits by Mandy's sort of behind the scenes video about what she made in her first year on YouTube that really got the gears turning in my brain about the actual practicalities of starting a knitting podcast and made me really want to do it. And I feel like I would really like to pay it forward to my fellow incredibly nosy people who would like to know all the details about the behind the scenes of the first year of a knitting podcast, in this case, my knitting podcast. So I'm planning to do a video going over all of the numbers from my podcast in the first year, how much it made from different sources of revenue, how much I spent on yarn and other things like that related to the channel. Did this hobby pay for itself in the first year of the channel? So I'm already planning to cover all that, but I'm also curious to know if there are things that you are curious to know about kind of behind the scenes of the first year of my YouTube channel. So if you have any questions that you want to ask me about having the podcast, about how it started or how it works, or anything you can think of, please leave a comment with your question, because I'd love to address as many of those as I can in a video going over the sort of meta aspect of the podcast. So let me know what you want to know. Feel free to be nosy. I always am. All right, let's do a whip update on whip number 1. So we are finally starting the collet pullover. Now, we also are starting and stalling very quickly. So I did first knit a swatch. So this is what my swatch looks like. First, let's backtrack. What is this? So I am knitting the collet pullover by Sari Nordland. This pattern costs $6.90 in euros, and it's designed to accommodate up to between a 58 to a 62 inch bust, again, depending on the amount of positive ease that you want. I'm knitting the size 1, and this is a DK weight pattern designed to be knit out of a fingering weight held together with a mohair, but I'm actually knitting this out of the Wandering Flock Cotton Lino in the color Citrine, which is a mix of 35% organic cotton, 30% mulberry silk, 20% linen, 15% baby alpaca. So there's a lot going on in here, and this is a DK weight yarn. So I was like, okay, perfect, we'll do that. So to complete this pattern, I purchased 3 skeins of this yarn. I ordered it online directly from the Wandering Flock, which cost me $134 Canadian. So with that and the pattern, our total project cost is $145 Canadian, or about $106 US. Now, this is a DK weight yarn, so it's like, okay, great, perfect. This will be great for this pattern, and I'm not sure that's true, and this was kind of a rookie error. Like I know that yarns that are all the same weight aren't necessarily the same, or in fact actually exactly the same weight. So let's get the swatch back out. So this is the second swatch that I started. I started an earlier iteration because the pattern calls for 3.5mm needles, and I believe that I did my first swatch on 4mm, knowing that my gauge always comes out tight. So I'm always having to upsize my needles. That's fine, great. But I was finding when I was doing it on 4mm needles that it was coming up small, and like quite small. And I was like, dare I upsize more? So to get gauge, I ended up using a 4.5mm needle. Now it did get me gauge, but I was looking at the swatch wondering, like, is it too open? Like, you can definitely see lights and darks coming in from behind, right? But then looking at the pattern photos, Like, it definitely is a more open knit by design, right? This is not super tight fabric. You can see things in behind Sari's knit as well. But there is, I think, a non-negligible distinction here, which is that hers includes a mohair, which, while it doesn't hide the fact that it's a more open knit, it does definitely do a little bit to, I think, make the openness of it look a little bit more deliberate. And I just was looking at this, just wondering, like, does it just look like it was knit on too big of needles? Like, does it just look like I couldn't get gauge? And I wasn't really sure. And I was like, well, maybe I just need to start it and see how I feel as it starts to come together. And maybe that'll kind of help me come to a conclusion. Like, if I hold it up against like a white shirt, I feel like it looks pretty good. And it's not like super obvious. But if it was over something a little bit darker or just over like skin, it's a little more like, if I put it over my neck, like you can see, I mean, I am pretty pasty. My skin isn't that far from this shirt, but I feel like you could see it more. I don't know. So I cast it on. Let's see what I have. Oh, I knotted this so it wouldn't come off the tube. Actually, let me unknot this so I can show you properly. So you cast on the back of the neck here, and then you're doing increases. You can see that it's getting wider at each side. And I don't know, like, I just, like, does this look fine? Like, does this look like clothing? Does that look good? Does it look like the gauge is too open and I need to reevaluate my plan? I don't know. So I got this far and I was like, I still don't know. And maybe I won't know until I get far enough that there's like a neck and shoulders and I can try it on and actually put it on like a shirt and like see. But that's so much knitting to do to get to that point. So I kind of thought, okay, let's like put a pause on it. Looking at it on the monitor there, I feel like it looks good there. But like, is that just because it's at a distance? Like, if you thought that looked good, do your feelings change if I do this? Like, I don't know. And even that, like, it's probably bunched up a little bit on the needles. Like, is that accurate to finished gauge? Like, maybe it's more like this. How do you feel about that? I don't know how I feel about it. So I've kind of been having this dilemma that I don't really know. Do I proceed? Do I need to, well, so here's the thing. I don't really feel like I have great options from here because, so one option could be getting a matching mohair to hold double with it to fill in the gaps a little, but I don't love that option, A, because this makes this way more expensive as a project, and B, because I specifically wanted to use the cotton lino base to have a much lighter weight sweater in my knit wardrobe. I wanted something that I could wear when it's not super duper cold, and mohair is famously super hot, so that would no longer really fit the brief. So I don't love that option. But then when I was looking at my yarn quantities relative to what the pattern calls for, I don't think that I can up my size. I might be able to go up one size and be okay, but even that, I think I had like just what the pattern calls for. And so like if my row gauge is coming up short, I'm probably not going to get the sleeve or body lengths that I want with it still. So I don't love that. I could maybe knit the same size I'm currently knitting size 1, on slightly smaller needles. Like if I go down to like 4.25, like is that enough to kind of make the fabric feel like a little bit better but not throw my gauge off too much and kind of leave me enough yarn that I can just like knit the few extra rows I need to compensate? I don't know. I don't feel great about any of these options. Can I just order a 4th skein, you may ask? Well, not currently, because the Wandering Flock doesn't currently have it in stock. I can hope that they might restock it for the summer season. I think it's kind of like a summery yarn for them, but when will that happen? Will it ever happen? Will I end up with an incomplete garment just waiting on another skein of yarn that's never going to exist? Will it happen but it doesn't match at all because it's been a year and the dye lot is dramatically different? I don't know. So I feel very torn about this project. Like I feel like I just keep looking at it and being like, I don't know. But it looks good in the monitor. But the monitor's not real life. I don't know. Do you know? Do you know? Please help. I will say, as far as positive things on this project, I did, in the, brief time I was working on this, I cast this on Boxing Day in the evening. I kind of just gotten home from family Christmas festivities and was like, okay, yes, I can get into this. I can start a new project. I'm free of the Minu cardigan. I gave it to my sister for Christmas. We are free to do as we please. Delightful. So I did really enjoy watching this pattern knit up. Like, the kind of intermingling of the rows with the eyelets and the cables is really cute. Am I a little bit tired of doing cables after doing the Minu cardigan and before that the Christmas stockings? Yes, a little. I was kind of like, I wouldn't mind doing something different right now. And then, while all of these things were happening, my gauge issues, my would I kind of like to not be doing cables for a minute issues, in the midst of all this, a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine, Lauren, sent me a gift card to a yarn store, and I also had hoarded a previous gift card. And with these, I was like, I have not been planning to purchase more yarn. I have been planning to avoid purchasing more yarn because I do have this yarn for the Call It Pullover that I have been planning to start, waiting for my opportunity to start. And I also have ordered yarn for my Serendipity sweater, but it's taking a while because it's like being ordered in from La Bien-Aimée via Wool & Co. So it's like an 8-week thing. Anyway, but all this to say, I spent a lot of money on yarn recently. So I've been like, you're not spending more money on yarn. Work on your Call It Pullover. When your Serendipity sweater stuff gets here, work on your Serendipity sweater. That's fine. You're good. But then the gift card happened and gears started turning. And I was like, okay, well, if I were to buy something from La Maison Tricoté, what would it be? And one of the brands that they carry is Knitting for Olive, and I quite like Knitting for Olive yarn. I've used it before for several projects, and they had several colors in stock, but not nearly all of them. So this was kind of giving me some like creative parameters to work within, and I was like, okay, out of these colors, what do I like? What would I want to make out of them? And I'm sort of looking at those, perusing my Ravelry favorites. And this is the story of how my winter knitting plans have only just begun and I'm already off the rails because my next whip was nowhere to be seen in these winter knitting plans. And it is my most active whip at the moment. So surprise, I am knitting the Lyon sweater by Petite Knit. This is a pattern that accommodates up to a 59-inch bust, which like, why are so many of the Petite Knit patterns like that close? Like, why are you so close to the 60 inches that everyone is always talking about, but like not quite there? Like, it's so close that I don't want to disqualify it just on the basis of like not being size inclusive, because like it's so close and not the same as a sweater that only goes up to like a 47-inch bust. But I just, why are you so close? But not there. Anyway, I'm planning to knit the size 2, and this is a pattern that costs 50 Danish kroner or about $10 Canadian. So placing my order from La Maison Tricoté in Quebec, I ordered 7 balls of the Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Blood Orange and 4 balls in the color Poppy Rose. So this came out to $180.24 Canadian, which gets free shipping from their website. And minus the $100 I had in gift cards, plus the cost of the pattern, this project has cost me a total of $90 Canadian or about $64 US. So I cast this on January 1st. I did knit a swatch, and I confirmed my suspicions, which were that I would need to upsize from a 4mm needle to a 4.5mm needle, which I felt fairly confident in because the gauge of this pattern is either the same or very similar to my Petite Knit No Frills cardigan, where I had to make that exact same needle modification, so makes sense. So I cast this on January 1st, and let me show you what we've got. So I have this project in my Shakespeare & Company Paris tote bag, which I got from my sister for Christmas. Sister for whom I knit the Minu cardigan, and with whom some of you have been getting up to shenanigans in the comments on my previous video because she basically live commented my entire Everything I Knit This Year video. Anyway, she got me this really nice tote bag. It's embroidered. Isn't that fancy? We know I like embroidery, as evidenced by my shirts that are available on my Etsy shop. Shameless self-promo. Anyway, so what I have so far is actually kind of hard to show you on these needles because it is quite a small circumference for the actual amount of sweater currently on it. But the construction of this sweater is very odd to me, but I love it. Like, I felt like, as I was saying, I was like, I have no idea what this is called, what's going on, what's happening, but it's great. So basically the way that this starts is you cast on, similar to the Call It Pullover to begin with, you cast on the back of the neck and you're making this sort of trapezoid shape. And then you pick up along that diagonal edge to start knitting like the fronts of the shoulders. And then you also pick up to knit the sleeve. Even just like, I did this like days ago and I'm just like trying to remember to explain it to you. Like, it didn't really make sense at the time, so I don't think I can make it make sense now. I just know that as it came together, like kind of every step of the way I was like, ooh, like, Like just in a way where I was like, I didn't think that was how this was gonna work, but it is coming out so clean. Like just the way that like as you're working that angled edge on the back, you get this like really clean, beautiful, sort of like seamy looking thing here, which is not a seam. You don't have to seam anything together, but it does look like such a nice just like detail. And I feel like it's looking a little bit like sort of rumply here, just the way it's like bunched up on the needles, but it is in fact just this like really nice clean line detail that is like at each shoulder that I just really, really like. And I tend to hate picking up stitches, but this was just a case where it felt very intuitive to me. Like I felt confident that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. All the numbers always added up. Like she's very specific about what your pickup rate is at which point, and those numbers actually worked out for me, which like when I was doing my new cardigan button band, they did not, as you will know if you saw my everything I knit this year and how much of a battle that was. So it just felt so nice to be like, I'm blindly following these instructions. I do not understand how this construction works whatsoever, but wow, it works, and wow, this is cool, and wow, it looks nice. Like it's just, the details are just really good. Like I feel like, I know that petite knit can be a little bit polarizing. You know, a lot of people knit like almost exclusively petite knit, and a lot of people are like, what is the big deal with petite knit? Like it's so overrated. But I feel like the thing that I do tend to hear is just the attention to detail in her patterns really stands out. And I feel like I am seeing that in this pattern more than I could see in the No Frills cardigan, because it's just so kind of simple as a garment and as a construction. It's just a raglan construction. So it didn't really feel like anything to write home about. But this one I'm really enjoying. I feel like it's giving such a nice structured look. Like it has the look of like a seamed structured sweater, but it's not a pain. Like I hate seaming things, and I worried that I would kind of also hate all the like picking up of, because it's like, okay, sure, yes, it's technically knit in one piece, but like in this sort of fragmented way where you're knitting a lot of the first parts of the sweater flat and connecting things and picking up stitches and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, is that going to be terrible? And it was not terrible. And I'm so delighted that it was not terrible. And what I also really love is that, again, with the new cardigan, I was talking about not loving the fact that there's no sort of shaping for the back of the neck. This one, this is how long the back is. Look how long the front is. Look how much of a drop we have for the neck. Like, it's just, it's just gonna be so good. It's gonna have actual room for an actual human body to sit inside of it, and the neck not be like, you know? I'm just very excited about this. I did also, as you can see, I already went ahead and did the folded neckband, which is like the last stage in the pattern. But I've found in doing other projects, I really like to do this, to do these sort of like finishy touches earlier in a pattern. So I took the opportunity of like one of the times that I just ran out of yarn and needed to join a new ball, I just went in and did the neck before going back to do that, because it allows you to try it on and like actually understand what it's gonna look like, right? Before you get very far. And when I first did that, I was like, I don't know, this neck feels like massive. Like, doesn't it just kind of feel giant? I don't know. It feels weird. I don't know. I better go like put this on try on tubing and test this immediately before I get any further. And then I put it on and was like, huh, that's definitely not too big. Like, if anything, it sits a bit higher up on the neck than Petite Knits does, which might loosen in blocking. My gauge did change a little bit after blocking on my swatch, but it's great. It looks great. It's definitely not too big. I thought I might have a problem. Total non-issue. I am also really enjoying just a return to like low-key stockinette. Like I just have been knitting elaborate stitch patterns for months and months and months now. So this is just such a nice like break for both my brain and my hands, because I do find that cabling is a little bit tougher on my hands. Just the tension tends to be tighter, and I think like I'm a tight knitter anyway, so the extra tension of cables, like it's just nice to not be doing that for a bit and to not have to be pulling out a cable needle, to have some rows that are taking so much longer than other rows because suddenly I have to do a cable. Like I also have stopped right before the point where I start my first stripe, so I'm excited to start striping. I remember from my Sailor Swift top how much I enjoyed that and how motivating it was. Like I love stockinette in the round, but can also sometimes just start to feel a little bit too bland. Like there's just sometimes you don't have quite the same sense of motivation because you don't have like a repeating pattern knitting up in a way that's really showing you your progress. And stripes are so easy, but they're like just enough to really give you that sense of progress. So I'm very excited to add in my first ball in this color. And so this was sort of loosely inspired by one of Sarah Lily Make's projects. And now hers is like a true red and pink, whereas this is more of a red orange that definitely I think like leans orange. So it's a little bit off from that, but I just really love this combo. I was really inspired by her combo, but I also just have a really strong personal bias toward an orange. orange red. I also have to say, I'm just so excited to be knitting myself a sweater again. Like, if I think about it, it's been a long time since I made myself a sweater. Like, the last sweater that I made was for my sister. And before that, I was knitting a lot of warm weather garments. Like, last summer was the first time I really got into summer knits, and some of them kind of dragged out into the fall. And before that, the last sweater I made myself was my No Frills cardigan, which took 6 months of my life because it's giant, and it's a cardigan. So it had been since like 2023 that I last made myself a pullover sweater. And I love pullover sweaters. I feel like that's like my favorite thing to like have knit, to like have in my wardrobe that I made for myself. And I didn't make any of those last year. And I'm so happy with all the things that I made last year, but just realizing like, it's been a while since I've made this like very key thing. And I'm very excited to be doing it again. I'm very excited to have a new one in my wardrobe. So thank you, Lauren, for nudging me in the direction of some yarn that would allow me to do that. I also should mention there was kind of a whole like kerfuffle for me around the color of this because actually, one sec, I have to go get something. So for this project, when I actually placed that order from La Maison Tricoté, I actually ordered this as my contrast color. This is the colorway Flamingo, which is sort of a light pink color. But if I hold it up beside Poppy Rose, you can see that it's a much darker light pink color and also kind of a dustier tone, which from online I thought was going to be fine, and they only had this color in stock. They did not have this color in stock. But when I got them and held them together, I was like, I don't feel like this is giving me the kind of like cotton candy pink feeling and the contrast that I was really looking for when I was inspired by Sarah Lily Makes project. And I feel like it's also really reminding me of both the color palette of this quilted sweater jacket with the pockets and the Laura Delgard Intarsia sweater that I made with the same color palette. Like, it's just giving more of that sort of muted, almost like 70s color palette that is just not what I was looking for with this one. I wanted something much more bright and poppy, actually, pun intended. So I am actually going to be returning this color, and I picked up this one instead. But so there was kind of a debate around like, is it worth trying to like do this exchange, returning this color, blah, blah, blah. But I decided in the end, like, I do think I will be much happier with this combo than I would have been with this combo. So lessons learned, just because a color is the one that's in stock doesn't mean you're actually going to be happy with it. So maybe look into your other options. Note to self, you're picky, you should know this by now. I have to say, looking over here at this pile of yarn that I've been showing you, these 3 colors together are really pretty. So I might have to bear that in mind for something in the future, or possibly just like a scrappy project with remnants from these. I don't know, I just really like the combo of that citrine green with the pink and the orange. So I might have to add that to some kind of mood board because it's very interesting and not something that had occurred to me until those 3 colors were just like sitting there side by side by chance. So interesting. All right, so that's all I've got for you today on the knitting updates front. I don't know what this is going to edit down to. I've been recording for not nearly as long as normal, so either I really nailed it on the whole like one take thing today, or this is going to be a shorter episode than usual. So sorry if that's the case. Maybe that's just the Friday night of it all, or maybe that's just where I am in my projects right now. But that does bring us to Off the Needles, where I talk about non-knitting things in the sort of creative hobby world. And today that's going to manifest as a good old-fashioned book update. So last time we talked about books, we were talking about Verona in Autumn, which I was in the middle of reading, not in the middle at the beginning of reading. And this was my second attempt at reading this book because I'd gotten about 50 pages in, put it down last summer, just kind of got sidetracked. Was enjoying it last summer, but got sidetracked. Struggling to get into it this time, and it was doing that thing where it was just sitting on my nightstand and I just wasn't reading because I just wasn't feeling compelled enough to open it. And I mean, some of that was that I was so obsessively working on the menu cardigan to finish it for Christmas. But even post-Christmas, I was like, for a few days. So I was like, you know what? No, my reading routine is too precarious right now. I've been in too much of a funk with it. We cannot afford to be trying to read books that we're not caring apparently to read. So put that one aside and decided to pull out Normal People by Sally Rooney, which I received for Christmas. And so I have not read any Sally Rooney. And this is not like, I've always kind of vaguely had the impression that I would probably like her stuff, but in kind of the way that I never feel in much of a rush to go check out anything that everyone is telling me is really great. Like, there's a part of my brain that's just like, I'll get to it eventually. Like, this is a lot. I can't. So that part of my brain has kind of compartmentalized Sally Rooney for the last few years. She's never quite made it to the top of my TBR, despite always kind of being vaguely on my radar of like, oh yeah, you'll like that at some point, go read that at some point. And the closest that I got was, I think last year, I watched the miniseries that they made out of Conversations with Friends, I guess. So that's the closest I gotten. But this book was on my wish list, and I received it for Christmas. And I got through it really quickly. I found it very easy to read. I mean, it's short, that doesn't hurt. But also it's just her style. It's kind of a funny, like, this feels really silly trying to describe Sally Rooney's writing, because I feel like if you care, you probably already know, because she's pretty ubiquitous. But she's a very I think she definitely falls into the like literary world, but in a way that is very readable and not like intimidating. The one kind of quirk about her writing that I'm not sure how I feel about is the absence of quotation marks. Like for most of the book I was like, I don't really get like, why couldn't we just have those? Like they're helpful, we have them for a reason. Toward the end there are a few moments where I was like, oh, like there's kind of like an interesting like ambiguity that's happening here without those. Okay, I kind of like that. I kind of see what that's doing. That's kind of cool, but I'm not sure if it's like worth never having them. I don't know how I feel about that as a stylistic choice. I think I had heard about her like quotation marks thing in the context of her new book Intermezzo, and thought that it was specific to that book because I saw people complaining about that book for that reason and was like, oh, that's just a thing she decided to do for that book. But then it also is a thing here, so I'm now assuming it's a thing in her other books as well. I don't know, I haven't gotten there yet, but I do think I would like to get there because I did like this. Like I found it, I just every night I was like compelled to pick it up. I was like interested to go back to reading it before bed and was like fighting through eyes trying to close because I wanted to read just a little bit more. So that's a good sign. I do feel like Normal People is a very apt title. Like I love books that aren't really like about anything. And I feel like this is a book that's not really about anything. Like it's just about people living their lives. Very normal people living their very normal people lives, and I liked it. So I am curious to pick up her other books. I don't think Intermezzo will be her next one that I pick up. I saw it in a bookstore the other day and was like, oh, that's chunky in a way that I don't feel like my current reading habit is strong enough to sustain. So I will pick up some of her shorter ones first. I'm intrigued. I am on the Sally Rooney train. I'm not like, oh my god, this was life-changing, my new favorite book. I love it, but I did really enjoy it. And I think I thought when I started reading this, so this was her first book, but upon inspection, I believe that Conversation with Friends was her first book. And in my experience, and like for actual practical reasons, I think it's actually a thing. I think people's second books tend to not be as good as their first books. It's most authors' first time writing under a time crunch on a deadline, like under a contract. A lot of times when you sign your first book, it's a contract for that book plus a second as of yet unwritten book. So it's just a very different kind of pressure people are writing under, and it tends to not yield as good of a book the first time someone has to do it. So if I enjoyed her second book as much as I did, I'm very curious to check out the first one that she got signed for. You know, the one that an agent read and was like, oh my god, I'm in love. And I want to read this 27 times while we edit this and get it through publication. So once I finished that, I did head to the bookstore because I was like, do I have a small pile of books on my home that I've not yet read? Yes, I do. However, they have all been sitting there for at least a few months now, many much longer. And the fact that I've not yet read them suggests that I don't feel any great like urgency, excitement to read them. And again, my reading state is precarious at the moment, so I think I need to get a book that I'm going to be like very actively excited to dive into. So the book that I chose for that is The Midnight Library, which I feel like I have been seeing people talk about constantly for the last several months. And I mean, it has the word library in it. Like, you had me at hello. This is also not a particularly long book. It's like under 300 pages. So I was like, great, perfect, momentum. That will be excellent. And I'm not sure. I'm 70 pages into it. And so the good news is that I don't feel like I've read 70 pages. Like it's not been like a slog, right? Like I feel like I've read like 20 pages. And you know what? In a way that's probably true because half the pages are like empty in that way that books with really short chapters are. So yeah, it's not been 70 solid pages of reading, but I do feel like it is going quickly, even if I'm not yet super hooked. But I also know like, you know, this book has kind of like a speculative component to it, and a lot of the like setting up of that has had to happen at this beginning, and that's never my favorite part of a book. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm like about to get sucked in the way that everyone else seems to be. I'm hopeful that I am, and I'm not like, ooh, I can go to bed and read my book now, but I'm also not like, I'm not gonna bother tonight. Like I am still picking it up. So that's encouraging, and I'm hopeful that I will get more into it over time. All right, Cobra has decided to join us. Hi, hello. How are you? What have you been reading lately? What do you like? Yeah. All right, he's still here beside me, but now he's out of frame. But so hopefully I'll get more into it. What I will not get more into is deckled edges. I despise deckled edges on a book. I do not, if you don't know, deckled edges is when they pay more money to make the edges of the paper terrible, like this, where you can't like grab them to turn the page. It's the worst. I hate it. So anyway, rage aside, that's all the reading updates that I have for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you're not already. If you are, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time. Bye.